Welcome, everybody, to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. We have another great show tonight, one of my favorite people.
That's right, Amanda Milius. I thought you were going to introduce her. Amanda Milius, film director and producer of The Plot Against the President. You watched this documentary.
Yeah, it's a great documentary. It has, everybody you can imagine, Kash Patel, Devin Nunes, Rick Grenell. It's kind of a who's who of who was in the foreign policy and intelligence world for Donald Trump. And they tell the story of stumbling across the evidence or finding the evidence that showed that Obama was spying on Trump.
Right.
Started with Clinton.
And it all came out, didn't it?
And it all came out right when Hillary was trying to suggest that she'd be their next nominee. All this proof came out. And guess what else has been proven to be true?
What else?
Hunter's laptop from hell.
Oh, that's right.
All of these things they tell us are made up and are propaganda turn out to be true.
Schlapp, let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen with the Hunter Biden laptop investigation? I mean, he is under investigation, but obviously the media doesn't spend a lot of time covering what Hunter Biden has done so far.
Look, I think justice is on trial throughout the country. There's two systems of justice. We used to say that in a racial context, and now it comes down to whatever your politics are. And we know that the people who have our views, and most of this audience would share our views, it's like you don't get justice anymore. And I think there's a lot of people within the justice system that would like to show that justice can be blind and justice can be fair. And I think what's on that laptop creates huge problems for Joe Biden. And I will say this, if it's true that the laptop has all this criminal behavior, and including documented financial transactions and such, including with foreign powers or foreign entities, I should say, I think that new Republican majority in the House, they really have to take this seriously and investigate. And of course, if they find wrongdoing, they might have to consider impeaching him.
Well, Joe Biden creates huge problems for Joe Biden himself. I want you to take a listen to what Joe Biden, that's right, our president, said in Poland this past weekend.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refused to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. We will have a different future, a brighter future, rooted in democracy and principle, hope and light, of decency and dignity, of freedom and possibilities. For God's sake, this man cannot remain in power.
Now, Schlapp, I've been part of the White House communications department, not Biden's, but Trump's. And the comms team had to come out and clean up Joe Biden's mess, because he's basically saying, we got to get this guy Putin out of here. But then the White House quickly comes out and says, no, he didn't mean regime change. This is such a huge screw up when it comes to our foreign policy and how we're dealing with Russia. I mean, any single word President Biden says could literally provoke a war.
So when you're overseas and when the president's making these foreign policy pronouncements, it's very well staffed out through the interagency process.
That's right.
And so when Biden gets off script, one word, one sentence can really send the whole world into kind of like panic. And he did it a couple of times. They had this question about whether or not Putin would use chemical weapons or biological weapons, and if that would result in an in-kind response. The idea that we'd even intimate that the American government would use chemical weapons in this area was insane.
Exactly. Great point.
And so you have this point as well, which is somehow we're going to topple Putin. So I remember tweeting out, are there any other world leaders that Biden would like to announce he's going to topple? You can try to topple a leader. It's very strange for the President of the United States to come out and say it in a speech. So of course, they had to clean it up and say he didn't really mean that. Here's the real problem for them. I have no idea what their policy is. I don't know if their policy is to help the Ukrainian government or not help the Ukrainian government. I don't know whether they're really trying to give them offensive arms or just kind of some things that they might need that can get them part of the way there. That's their big problem right now. Nobody knows where we stand.
Well, and the Ukrainian President Zelensky, he basically said that the U.S. is basically afraid of Putin, of facing off, of confrontation with Putin. So Zelensky's almost feeling
but they don't even, but the Biden administration doesn't even take the virtue out of that position, which is, although we don't like anybody invading their neighbor, it's not our fight. So you could say, look, they're going to have to get to the negotiating table. We can help facilitate that, but this is not our fight. But Biden's out there acting like it is their fight. He flew over there to make it sound like we have common cause with the Ukrainian people, yet he's really doing nothing to help the government of Ukraine. So that's why I say we don't really know what the policy is, except a series of speeches to try to take the focus off the disaster of the American economy and what's going on here at home.
You brought that up as well. I do want to play one clip talking about not only another thing that I think President Biden said that was a bit, I don't know, interesting. Let's take a listen.
The fact that you have so many Ukrainians seeking refuge in this country of Poland. We understand that because we have in our southern border thousands of people a day, literally, not figuratively, trying to get into the United States.
Well, there's an admission. President Biden admitting that our southern border is completely open to anybody who wants to come here.
That's a great point, Matt.
And I think it's outrageous for him to compare the 10 million Ukrainians that have fled to places like Poland because of this invasion to the people crossing our southern border, who are basically crossing our southern border because they want to get a better life in America or apply for benefits in America.
Right.
You know, that's a whole different scenario.
Well, it's a whole different scenario when you're dealing with an economic plight versus what you would call like a political refugee, life and death, war. And I think in the southern border, obviously, it just shows how weak our immigration laws are, and where they're not enforcing immigration laws. The mere fact that there's so many loopholes that's basically creating this magnet of more and more immigrants coming in illegally into the United States. Very different from Poland, where actually Poland is saying we're here to take these refugees and these other countries as well. I do want to get a quick word from you. And these poll numbers just came out basically saying that President Biden is at a 40% approval rating. When you're talking about that the vast majority of Americans do not agree of his handling of the situation with Russia and Ukraine. They're obviously very concerned about gas prices going up as well. So, I mean, you're talking about Americans being really upset with the current state of affairs and this presidency.
So Biden came in with a bit of a honeymoon where he was over 50% in his favorables and in his approvals. And what you've seen is as his policies have been implemented, the unleashing of inflation, the unleashing of these high gas prices, the economic uncertainty over the virus and the panic that ensues in these big, brittle blue cities like Washington, D.C., his numbers have really been dragged down by his own policies. And he's right around the high 30s, low 40s, except for his State of the Union, pretty consistently. And so what happens...
But remember, State of the Union, they usually have a bump.
Hit a little bump.
Very little bump.
But what happens in politics is it kind of sets in with the voters, with the American people, what their view of you is. You could say that about Trump. He never had high numbers, but there was this virtue to the fact that he'd fight. You don't see much virtue in Biden. The only virtue he sold the American people on is that things would go back to normal and there wouldn't be so much chaos in Washington. Well, of course, we've seen the opposite. Washington is basically broken. And nothing's gone back to normal. Matter of fact, everything that we were worried about got a lot worse. And the rhetoric from their side is just different, but it's just as toxic as their constant attacks, for instance, with the 1-6 committee. So I think what I would worry about if I was a Biden advisor is I don't know what they have to get out of this. Their policies are stink, and he can't talk, and he creates problems when he talks. And Kamala Harris is more toxic than he is. We're not even talking about her approval. So what are the tools they have to get out of this thing?
That's a great point about
Jen
the tools.
Psaki. If you say Jen Psaki.
Well, at least she can.
She's like the president, by the way. She's the only person who talks, and at least she makes sense.
Put a sentence together. But I think you're so right. I think the idea is, and Wall Street Journal wrote about this, where the editorial page basically saying they shouldn't allow President Biden to give any more public appearances. But then if you can't put Biden out, you can't put Harris out. Who do you have left? Blinken?
They've got to put out that idiot Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State. They've got to put out Austin and Blinken. They've got to become the spokespeople. They've been trying with Jake Sullivan, who is not exactly...
No, he looks like a professor, like giving a
so
lecture in a public science,
I hate to say it, but Jen
class.
Psaki, it's like she really is she's the personification of this administration, and I actually think she's a competent communications person. But come on, I mean, that's kind of...
Well, she can't really defend the policies, and she really doesn't have very clear answers on defending what President Biden has said. She has to be, it's just the toughest job. But, we have a lot more to come in the show. We've got Amanda Milius joining us. She's fantastic, so stay with us.
Hey everyone, this is Matt Schlapp with CPAC, and it's my privilege to tell you that we've got a very important project that we've just announced, the First Amendment Fund. It's a brand new fund that we've created through our criminal justice reform efforts to raise money to take care of you, Americans who are being canceled and desecrated out there around the country. We know it just happened in Virginia, where parents were called domestic terrorists by the Biden administration, where people who just want to express their political views are canceled left and right. Now we have this terrible specter of a vaccine mandate where you can lose your job or be prevented from going to a restaurant or go to school according to your vaccination status. These are all the things that are happening in this country that are making people realize that America is in a fight to defend the principles that have made her great. If you want to be involved in this important effort, please go to conservative.org, click the link for the First Amendment Fund. Please donate to this C3 to help these victims across the country, including those who are just involved in politics, to make sure they have the legal representation they need to be able to live their great American life. Welcome back to CPAC Now, America UnCanceled. We're going to get to talk to one of my absolute favorite people who graced us in Orlando, Florida, and is just a warrior in the culture and in politics generally. The director and editor of Plot Against the President, Amanda Milius. Amanda, I hope I got all your titles
Editor,
right.
Schlapp, producer. What are you talking about?
Producer.
Well, isn't editor better?
Not to the editor.
Amanda, I'm so glad you're with us. I got to tell you something. You and Matt were literally in the trenches in Nevada, and he always brings up these stories of, oh, and then Amanda this and Amanda that. And I mean, tell us, when you remember going back to that 2020 election, you know, it was really painful for all of us. We're now seeing, obviously, this horrific January 6th committee. What do you remember from those moments of the campaign, especially after the election? And what do you think the American people should know?
I mean, really it's not like I needed to learn that there was fraud, because I was in Nevada in 2016 as well. And it's not like there was nothing going on that was very strange in 2016. It's just that we won the country in 2016, we lost the state, so everybody said, go to the party, we're not going to deal with this. So here comes 2020, and it's the same group of people, all the same lawyers that I had become friends with over the years, et cetera. And so I ran out there just to assist my lawyer friend, who was one of the local counsel. And then, you know, I walk in and there's Matt Schlapp, Rick Grinnell, Adam Laxalt, all these guys, you know, the core Nevada team trying to figure out what to do. Right. And so I just kind of buzzed in there, you know, trying to help with comms and whatever it was, whether it was like the wonky setup behind Matt and his TV appearances, or or writing, you know, talking points and trying to get us our story featured on mainstream news, which we actually succeeded at for about a week before it was like, no more talk about the election. And that was a very clear, I mean, Matt, you remember, it was a very clear difference between week 1 and week 2. And suddenly we weren't allowed to say certain things. We weren't allowed to say the names of certain things. And I think, you know, you being there right up close and fighting along with us. As I've said before, the only other thing I really fondly remember is sitting next to like the Matt Schlapp I imagined in my mind, who's this, you know, conservative, like, guy who I think you were sipping on a purple martini. Because we were at we had the whole gang, all the volunteers. We were at some horrific, Vegas mess that we all stood out like a sore thumb in our jackets and our campaign attire. And I just said to you, I was like, you know, Matt, you're actually a lot more based than people realize. And you were like, People keep telling me that. What does that mean?
I didn't know what it meant. I also don't know what a purple martini means, but what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. The worst thing about that Vegas night was I remember it was an interesting cast of characters, great people, really, really great patriots. And we're so stressed out, and we're sitting down, and we're getting adult beverages. And it was kind of the first moment I sat in a bar with like 2 feet of plexiglass around your face, because the thinking was that would keep the virus from going to other people in the bar. And I remember drinking this stupid-looking cocktail and looking at the plexiglass and saying, what the hell is going on? They just ripped off the presidential election, and now they're convincing us that like somehow we're going to not pollute each other with plexiglass. It was insane.
No, it was insane, and it was a ragtag group. It was Jesse Banal, the lead attorney for the president in Nevada. It was yourself. It was myself. It was all the volunteers. It was a real we were all thrown into such a insane situation. And to be fair, our case went to the top. We went to the Supreme Court of Nevada. We could go no higher. So obviously we did our best, and then came back to DC to the chaos here.
Yeah. No, let me just say one thing on the case, and I know we want to talk about a couple other things that are going on, but in Nevada, just so everybody knows, and we've talked about it on the show before, it wasn't a lack of evidence that harmed us. We had too much evidence. We had so much evidence that when we got to the airport in Carson City, we realized we couldn't get the evidence in one of the rental cars, so we had to rent a second car to get the boxes and boxes and boxes of evidence. And I remember Adam Laxalt saying to me, which was right, he said, if the judge rules too quickly, you'll know he didn't even look at the evidence. And that's what really happened in all these cases. It wasn't that we didn't have evidence. We had so much compelling evidence that there was only one remedy. And the one remedy is you couldn't accept the results of the election. And 1/7 of Clark County, which is where Las Vegas is, the county of Las Vegas, even the Democrats, 100% controlled by Democrats, even they threw out one of the county commission races because they said there was so much evidence of fraud that they couldn't even certify a winner, which that would raise questions about the result in Nevada. It was just rife with fraud. We had the evidence to demonstrate it. The judges didn't have the guts to do their job.
Stop. You and Amanda have to stop, because it is misinformation, and YouTube is going to cancel YouTube.
That's right.
Okay?
That's
So we got to be careful.
Please,
We have
to use like a different language. Like we have to come up with our own language, because God only knows YouTube is going to do that. Because guess what?
They did that.
They took down our content for CPAC all of Saturday, including the president's speech, and Sunday as well, right, Matt?
Yeah, half the content. And, our theme, as you know, Amanda and Mercy, it was awake, not woke. We actually didn't spend as much time talking about all the evidence of fraud in the election, because since that rigged election, now it's all about this woke politics. And so that's really what the focus of CPAC was. But even Lou Holtz, the revered Lou Holtz, Medal of Freedom winner, he got pulled down. And we didn't even talk about the election. We talked about winning football games, Amanda. And that's too much for YouTube.
Whenever anything of mine gets pulled off of YouTube, I'm not terribly shocked. I mean, when it was CPAC, I was, I'm usually on my best behavior. So that was actually quite surprising. But you're right. They really, if they're going to go after football, I mean, they're going after everything. And I don't even recall saying anything. Usually I'll be like, okay, maybe I pushed the envelope there. We all know when we get near these imaginary third rails that they've invented. But I don't even recall that happening in our whole talk, at least the one that I participated in. I think it was just they couldn't have this friendly conversation between MTG, myself, as a Jewish female Republican, and David Harris Jr. as a Black Republican. I think they couldn't allow that to stay. I think that's actually more what it was versus like us saying something that was really out of school, because it was such a friendly, not normal conversation that wasn't actually I don't even remember one controversial thing. I think it was the site of it that it disproved the narrative, and they were like, yeah, that one's got to go.
Okay, so I said that I said it wrong, but you're the director and producer of the plot against the president. I watched that on the Trump bus during the election, and it's a great documentary, and you guys should all go and get it immediately. Where do people get the the plot against the president. I've seen it on online.
It is, if you can't watch it on the Trump bus, not
It's
everybody
going to come
can.
back, Amanda.
It is. I want to see it on the Trump
Me
bus.
too.
It's available on Amazon, Amazon.com. Obviously, Amazon streaming on all of your TVs. It's on iTunes on all of your TVs. It's on Vimeo. It's on Salem Now, which is great because they're patriots. And if you don't like giving your money to, iTunes and Amazon, go to Salem Now. It is going to start a broadcast, a fairly regular broadcast, I'd imagine, on Newsmax very soon. And also, you should buy the DVD. If you're afraid of stuff being taken offline and censored, I didn't get it at first, but I was like, oh, this is why people are so hopped up on the DVD, which is at Walmart, Amazon, and Target.com. And it's because people feel more comfortable having it in their collection because they know that the truth, and it's not going to get, no one's going to, I mean, at least not yet.
Hey,
They're
Amanda,
not coming in.
that's why I bought Gone with the Wind, because I actually have it. I could actually play it when I want to play it, and they can't tell me that it's racist to want to watch one of the greatest movies ever made. Let me just correct the record. A lot of people are saying YouTube pulled down 2 days of CPAC, which is true, but anybody can go get the CPAC content. We were smart enough to make sure it's on our website, so you can go to conservative.org and pull down any part of CPAC over the 4 days. We just also pushed it out into every platform we possibly can, including these left-wing platforms. And we know that as we go forward, more and more of those will close their doors to us.
But more and more will open.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we did too. Is we didn't do an exclusive deal as far as it being, a 90-minute documentary. We didn't do an exclusive deal with anybody. That's why it's available on every platform possible that you can think of. It's probably on there because then you're not uncancelable, but you're balancing it out. It's not, you make economic decisions to do that, but this was an important enough message. Disproving Russiagate in front of the entire country before that election, I think, was just too important, and the message had to get out. And that's the same reason you guys are doing what you're doing with CPAC.
That's right.
I mean, these people need to feel like this is normal.
And it's amazing the viewership that we get because of it, because I think that people are saying we need the alternatives. We need to be able to find the truth and be able to have a discussion just on any specific topic. Let me ask you though, as a film director, are you constantly concerned of how big tech can cancel you and, take down the work that you've spent so much time doing?
I am less concerned than I probably should be because for some reason, look, I'm not in the platform building business, but there are a lot of entrepreneurs and ex-Silicon Valley folks, let's say, and I've just met a lot of very smart people that know that there is a massive demand for this, and where there's a demand, I believe the demand will be met. It may be a little bumpy over the next year, maybe even 2 years, but I think that a platform will come around, will rise above the rest. And, who knows what that is yet? Maybe it's Rumble, maybe it's something else, but there will be a way to sell your content and not be canceled. And that's an important thing that I always tell people is it's one thing to put it out on YouTube and release it for free, but you're not building an industry that way. You're not competing with Hollywood when you're just putting, videos out for free. You've got to build a competing ecosystem. And that's what my company, AMDC Films, is so dedicated to doing. And I think obviously there's other companies doing that too. And I applaud it, more voices, not less. What the Daily Wire is doing is great. What, there's a handful of companies trying to do this.
Yeah. Do you mind if I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
You mentioned
No,
Hollywood.
I guess I don't. I don't mind.
I was just this whole weekend with a bunch of college kids, so I'm like, my brain is just barely functioning. Shab had to handle some of the kids, and I got to spend some time with our oldest in college. But let me ask you a quick question, Amanda. You bring up Hollywood. Obviously, what's trending right now is the Chris Rock, Will Smith, slap on the face, this drama. It's, I believe, the first time that the Oscars might be getting some good ratings, at least in the last decade. Let's play this clip for the viewers to see.
G.I. Jane 2, can't wait to see it, all right? That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Wow. Will Smith.
Now, I know that this is not a serious domestic or foreign policy concern, but I got to tell you.
I think it's a domestic concern, but that's just my opinion.
But I got to ask you, like, what came over Will Smith? I mean, do you think it was more like, no one watches the Oscars, so let's, like, heat this thing, heat it up a little bit, cause a little bit of chaos?
That's it, a little bit. I mean, I almost feel bad, but I made a joke last night where I was like, look, if this is Hollywood's answer to the rating slump, is that they're going to go sort of the hockey route, and it's like fights aren't allowed, but we're not exactly going to break them up if they happen. I might start watching the Oscars again when I don't have to. That actually is that I'm bad enough that that's appealing to me. But no, in reality, I mean, I have said since I was 10 that Hollywood is a place filled with the most charitable I can be is to say extremely unbalanced people. And the lifestyles that they lead are not the type that lead to very stable, balanced people in general. And that goes for both of the people. I mean, to make a joke about somebody's potential health problems that could be far worse than in front of a husband and a wife, that's also that's just kind of gross, and it wasn't even that good of a joke. So in a way, I kind of side with him, but at the same time, it's completely out of control. Of all times, you're on television. If we did that at CPAC, it would be a way, way bigger and way.
Let me tell you, our big award winner was Lee Greenwood, and I never even thought about making a joke about his wife, who, by the way, is lovely, so I wouldn't even think about doing it. But here's all I could think of. First of all, there's something going on between Chris Rock and Will Smith we don't really understand. That was kind of obvious. And the second thing is, can you imagine them having to be a Trump supporter for one day and have to put up with the amount of crap we have to put up with? I mean, one stupid joke about your wife, it wasn't that funny as you say. Maybe it's a little mean, but come on.
Right. We have to hear this stuff every day. I mean, I am literally told like daily somewhere on the internet that I'm a Nazi, which is like the worst thing you can call a Jew, I'm pretty sure. So it's like, and that just goes with the territory because you work in the Trump administration. I mean, the amount of abuse that Republicans have just gotten used to taking is probably good. I think it's good to have a thick skin and be able to ignore people. I think that would have been the better play, and brought it up perhaps after the show at one of the parties, perhaps. But, no, they'd never make it. They'd never make it as a Republican for a single day.
Not a single day. And one day we're going to read about what's going on between Will Smith and Chris Rock. But that was just, I agree with you, it was bizarre. And it just shows you that these are very brittle people. What's wrong, you think, Amanda? Is it even people on the right just trying to get clicks and trying to figure out a way to raise their profile by trying to rip apart other conservatives? Do some conservatives just not know how serious this fight is? We're literally about ready to lose our country, and they get caught up in the intramural squabbles like this?
I mean, I think the last election has turned people around really badly, and I think that there's a lot of people not knowing what's real and what's not anymore. And I can understand that because it's almost like this whole thing has been like waking up in a bad dream. So I think there's just a lot of confusion about like who's actually, because you keep finding these people. I mean, you kind of can't blame the general public because they keep discovering things like Barr's book, right? Where Barr, who was supposed to be the savior of us in the Justice Department, has all these sort of dismissive and terrible things to say about the president. It turns out like all this and that. I mean, so you see people just get whiplash on like, wait, I thought this was a good guy. I can't keep track of it. And so, that's why I think it's important to just continue speaking the truth and continue to fight, because it'll be evident in people's actions like where they stand, and the public can catch on, and figure it out. I mean, I think it's partially that. It's also, I mean, you know, I think CPAC's a great institution, and I think I'm going to be really careful with how I put this. We need more institutions than just the RNC. So I think more is better than less. Again,
More
quoting
voices.
my
Not
less. More institutions, not less. It's not like the right is overwhelmed with functional institutions that give people a voice.
I agree
right?
with that completely.
I mean, we haven't seen the NRA in 2 election cycles. What have we got? So I'm going to say I think CPAC is a very needed part of that very, very small amount of infrastructure that the right has.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Our goal is to, obviously, I think with CPAC, as you know, is continue to expand, not only just nationally, but internationally as well. But we're so behind, I think, from the conservative side on our impact from a big tech standpoint, from really being able to continue to spread the word because of the fact that there's so much dominance coming from the left in this area. Do you think that, God willing, we get a Republican majority, and I mean, I'm praying to God they do something with big tech to try to at least break them up or do something a lot stronger than what we're seeing so far?
Well, the first step to that is making sure we ask the candidates, what would you do? Yeah. What's your plan? Not just like, we've got so many people that are coming in and everybody's America first. I mean, I haven't seen a single candidate somehow magically now after 4 years that's not America first. When 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that was like scoffed at and just a Trump thing. So we need to go beyond the slogans and actually drill down and figure out what all of these candidates actually stand for and what they're actually going to do on issues like big tech, on the out of control security state, which is the #1 issue in my mind. Especially when you see what they did to places like Project Veritas, and it's all tied in together. I mean, the big tech abuses of CPAC, like we've seen with YouTube, is emblematic of what they're doing to conservatives everywhere. So it's almost good for something as big as CPAC to be able to have a voice on this and to hold candidates' feet to the fire and say, what are you going to do us on the air next year? Like, what, really hold them to it.
There's a real controversy in the conservative world. Ken Buck and others are really taking an aggressive bipartisan stance against these companies. And I said when YouTube pulled us down that, we tend to be have a humility towards getting involved in regulating private companies, but they have so crossed the line that we have to kind of chuck our ideological purity off to the side a little bit and just make the pain stop. And the only way it's going to stop is if they fear legislation, regulation, and lawsuits. And so we're going to be fully engaged in all of them. We are a plaintiff in the class action lawsuit against big tech that John Cole has filed on behalf of President Trump, and we're going to be involved in these fights. We have to be. We got to make it stop.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, look, I would like to go back to I wasn't really participating in politics in the good old days of just when free market conservatism was like the topic du jour. Like, we can go back to that when I stopped worrying about my friends and I being dragged off to a gulag.
That's right.
Okay, so like, there's different levels of like policy immediacy, and we're in gulag stage, so we don't have any free speech. Where everybody's getting kicked off of everything. Everyone knows that. People are trying to build platforms in the middle of the night and so that we can still talk to each other. I mean, it's getting really out of hand. Yeah. So I think the type of conservatism that it's going to take to fight back is not your parents' conservatism, because we're not fighting your parents' left wing.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a new world. I mean, I didn't pick this fight, but this is the fight that came to us.
Well, Amanda Milius, we really applaud you for what you're doing. Keep up with the content. I know you're going to keep us up to speed on your next several projects that you're working on. Go get Plot Against the President today. If you haven't watched it, you need to watch it. Pretend that you're on the Trump bus. It'll be just as good. Keep up the good work, and we're going to see you in CPAC in Texas August 4
Absolutely.
through 7.
Okay, you guys too. You keep up the good work. Keep your chins up. I'll see you soon.
We're going to be right back to CPAC Now, America Uncanceled, after this short break.
So, Schlapp, as we're wrapping up here, I just want to point out to one of your famous tweets where you say, or you tweet, what do you write? Like, what time do you write these things?
I don't know. Do you need glasses or
No,
something?
I could actually read it.
Okay.
Yeah, give me your glasses. Let's see how they look.
Everything looks
Oh my
good.
God, you're more blind than I am.
I'm blind.
Okay, here's the deal. Dear woke billionaires, 1, there is no green energy. 2, there are no gender choices. 3, America's founding was good. 4, there is no synthetic beef. And 5, we are going to kick your, I'm not going to say the word because Lucille will get mad at us.
Donkeys.
In November. So this is responding to Bill Gates
Synthetic
basically
meat.
saying rich nations should move to 100% synthetic beef.
So
I'd love to get everyone's thoughts on this.
What
Seriously.
he's really talking about is synthetic protein or just protein. There's no such thing as synthetic beef. What I've come to realize about the left is they do commandeer words and they just make stuff up with phrases. So synthetic beef is this made up term as if it's really beef. It's not beef.
Right.
So all of these things, green energy, all energy has an environmental cost. We just don't count the cost for some forms of energy because they become politically correct. Others aren't. This idea of gender choices, and they're trying to teach our kids that there are 62 genders, that they can just kind of flow from one to the other, is insane and is creating destruction for girls in women's sports. And I think the one that bothers me the most is this idea that America is a bad and a racist place. They have changed these terms. They say things like systemic racism and stuff, and they just become part of our talking points.
Yeah.
And we just have to. So when I saw synthetic beef, I'm like, you know what?
We're done.
It's not a thing.
We're eating
We're not
hamburgers.
talking about that.
We're going to stick with
Just say you're a
hamburgers.
vegetarian. That's all that means. You're not eating beef. You're not eating meat. That's fine. But you're not. Don't pretend like you're eating meat because you're not.
Just so that you know, the ex-wife, Melinda Gates, just gave a ton of money to Planned Parenthood. So that just shows kind of where these people, these billionaires, have their values, which is
It's
absolutely
synthetic
different.
abortion, sweetie. It's not real abortion.
Stop, that's awful. That's awful.
That's what they would make us believe.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and watch again tomorrow night. Good night.